Welcome to Trees for Small Spaces. I'm Jess Mitchell, the Environmental Engagement Officer with the City of Marion. We also have here this evening Rebecca Newman, who's our Senior Environmental Planner. Nina Mani, welcome. Nadlu Tampandi Nadlu Gana Yatanka Imparendi. We acknowledge that we are meeting on Ghana land this evening. For our online audience, we'd love you to put in the comments where you're from. Also, feel free to ask questions in the comments and we will ask them on your behalf in the Q&A session this evening. Tonight we have with us Chris Lawry, Urban Forest Officer from the District Council of Mount Barker. He's an arborist
Hey Zoomers.
and a nature enthusiast. Tonight he's going to talk about urban tree canopy, how you can grow trees in small spaces. He'll bust a few myths and he'll answer your tree-related questions. Here at Marion, we also have a great arboriculture team, including Ian Sekefin, who also has a similar role to Chris. Ian was going to be here tonight, but unfortunately he couldn't make it. Councils across Adelaide collaborate on projects, and it's great that Marion could partner with District Council of Mount Barker this evening to bring you this event. Now I'll hand over to Chris to take us away for the evening. Thank you.
Thanks, Jess. That's great. All right, welcome. I've met most of you in the room. Nice to be here tonight. Thanks for the invitation, Marion Council. And I hope you're all right. Ian, it's a pity you're not here, mate. I miss you, mate, but I'll catch up with you. Excuse me, I'll just rewind a few slides here. We'll go back to the start. Had a bit of a practice before you came in. Small spaces for trees. See what I did there? Trees for small spaces. But what we have, the reality is, Joanna knows well, we now have small spaces for trees. So we've got to sort of work back the other way as well. So here we go. We'll get you on. That's me. I'm from that place. That's a great place to work. So the purpose of this evening, what I really want to do is to introduce various details and applications of tree establishment and management to you. And it's going to be a bit technical now and then. What I want you to do is just stop me anytime you want to go, what do you mean by that? We've got 45 minutes. That's quite a bit of time. I'm here to discuss the principles of the physics and biology required for success. And over you can see a bit of show and tell over there, which we'll get stuck into later on, which is both the physics and biology. Empower you with information and a renewed open mind to go forward and grow some canopy, which we really desperately need across our city. Yeah, there's a lot of rhetoric around at the moment, and that helps us in some way. So achieving a green Adelaide. This is my university lecture. Now, if we could be that green, how good would that be? But this is somewhere in Darwin. But one of the most important quotes I learnt from this gentleman is, I want you to take this on board, we need to complement natural processes at every step of growing, planting, and establishing trees. If you don't complement those natural processes, it's doomed to failure, and you're left scratching your head. And this is my little factoid for the evening. You've got to throw in a little factoid, but this is our life support system, the process of photosynthesis. I believe in the universe, this is biology and chemistry at its best. This is possibly, that chemical equation is possibly the most important in the universe in terms of us. So there's a bit of fun there. So when you're gardening and you're keen on gardening, keen on trees, it's all about photosynthesis. So, and that's all about our canopy as well. This is a bit of an interesting thing. Urban canopy, you would have heard a lot about that. It's in the newspaper a bit. The advertiser does bang on about it a little bit, which is fantastic. A lot of councils, a lot of LGAs have now sought to map the amount of canopy, a percentage of the entire city. And it's done with LiDAR, which is a laser distancing radar. So they fly over with an aeroplane. There's other ways to do it. There's a few ways to do it. LiDAR is one of them. These are LiDAR projects, essentially. And it's like a rangefinder. So you can even get the heights of your urban canopy as well with a LiDAR. There's another thing called iTree, and it's a sort of a software program where they scan old aerial imagery, and you can just do it off satellite imagery as well. Now, I've kind of got a feeling about where some of you people have been living. So who thinks, can you read that slide? Can people see that slide? I was a bit surprised when I saw that slide, because I picked City of Burnside as being probably the greenest, but City of Mitcham has the most canopy. And then third there, what do they got? 29%. So, like, that's a whopping 48.8. That's a fairly big. And I don't have the stats on where that's spread out, public, private, whatever. Other people would. Beck might know a bit more about that than me. The city of Tea Tree Gully, we like to call affectionately as the city of Tree Gully, because once again, lots of trees. Fantastic. What are they sitting at? They're only on number 3 there. They're about 29%, which is pretty good. Now, is there any surprises there for anyone? Port Enfield, not really. That's 9.9%. I used to work at the city of Charles Sturt, which is, what are they sitting at? 11.97. Now, to the best of my knowledge, the state government is sort of aiming for around about your 30 is an ideal. And if anyone's got any other better ideas about that, John, have you got any other ideas about what we should be aiming for? I think it's the ideal is 30%. It's a good one, isn't it? 30 sounds about right. Okay, we'll go for that. That's right. We don't want to scare people away. We'd rather have 50, 70, but 30 will do. There's that one across. It's all about stats and data and these days and metrics. They all want to see it. Over here, this is the city of Salisbury, so you can see how they've broken it down where the percentage of cover is. So private land, council roads, state roads, council land, state government land, federal government land, company land, all that sort of stuff. But so that percentage is sort of in there somewhere. Where's Salisbury? Number 12. Yeah, they've got a bit of work to do. So just sort of introducing you to that and the idea of canopy cover and urban canopy and growing trees. And you make a big difference to that in your own backyard. So what we need is more trees in people's private backyards and people to embrace that as well. Because what we're seeing now is in our brownfields developments, we're seeing a big old house block. I think you live in Marina with a massive house block. You have a lot of trees. Was it Kathy? Yeah, Kathy's got a lot of trees. She lives at how big's your block? Double house block. And these are the sort of blocks that are being cut up into 6 or 4 and complete raise to the ground, and all that canopy goes and all that beautiful environment that goes with it and the livability goes with it. I'm from Mount Barker Council, and we've just sort of started the metrics and that sort of stuff. This is an aerial, and we did all our metrics off aerial photography. We didn't do a LiDAR project. So if you can squint your eyes good enough, this is the town centre of Mount Barker, Zone 1, okay? And that wasn't too bad with 16, so let's call that 17%. Now this little zone, this is ye oldie Mount Barker. That's the really old, hardcore, it's been there since 1880, sort of Mount Barker, or even earlier than that. Zone 2, this little development area out here, this is a 1990s residential development, 22.9%, 22.92, sorry. That's not too bad. That's sort of a typical amount for the 90s. So the blocks aren't too small, they're not too big. You get about 600 square metres or more, even up to 1,000 square metres on those blocks. People have got enough room to have a tree. They've got enough room to not think that tree's a problem for them. Now, Zone 3, this is our growth area now. And it does actually extend further around and a little bit further around there. This is where what we call greenfields development's going on. So greenfields development's obviously greenfields, farms. Let's put houses on farms. That's what's happened there. Only currently 10.68%. Shouldn't be a surprise to anyone because it was paddock before. So not a lot of tree canopy out in paddocks at all. However, you watch in the next whilst there is a lot of 300 square metre blocks in there, and no one's going to have a tree on their private land, they'll have little ones. They won't have big ones. They'll have little gardens. And what actually happens is they put we like to call it a box with lots, which is the biggest house you can build on the smallest allotment you've got. But then what they want to do is put a Quaker barn out the back, or a warehouse shed, and there's no garden. It's all impervious surfaces, and it's hot, it's radiant heat, all that sort of thing. However, we've got a lot of street trees out there and some good reserve networks. So that's the future: street trees and reserve networks. And people who are keen enough to have a garden as well would be nice. But that tree canopy in 10 years, that will be quite a lot of canopy. So we have got a chance to get to 30% out there once all the street trees and reserve trees grow. In those greenfield sites, we're going to struggle with brownfields. But greenfields is a bit of hope. So.
Chris, I'll just mention that we can put in the link after this event. We'll follow up with an email with some links, and we can put that LiDAR graph that you showed in the previous slide there for people to have a look at home.
That's a good idea. Yeah, you can interrogate the data later on. Shade or shade? We're getting a lot of these things popping up, aren't we? All over the place. But you might already know the air temperature under one of those things isn't as cool as the air temperature under one of those things over there. So who would like to know, have a guess at why? So why is it not as cool under a shade sail as it is under a tree? Joanna knows, come on. Oh, so who's... Yep. Transevaporation. Just like in Adelaide, we've got those swampy air conditioners, and same thing. So it works on evaporative or transevaporation. So the more we can get people to understand that, the less of these we might see. It would be like it's a kids' playground. Sure, there's no tree that we should be growing, and there's some trees growing up in the background, but we should be putting more trees in at the start and more than these shade sails. And same with your house. Don't be afraid to put a tree in as well as your shade, and then aim to phase out your sail because you're going to have a tree. All right. And there's another example. So trees are cool. Trees are cool for the shade reason, but also the transevap reason, which is another massive cooling factor. And I love that slide because a hot day in the Barossa, look at the demand. People were just under that tree, parking anyway, which way they could. That's a real scenario. That's how much we do value trees when we need them. I actually stopped the car. I was driving down Edward Street in Door Park the other day, just having a look around, and I could see these trees coming up in the distance. And this house in Edward Street, and I encourage you to look around as you're driving around now and then and just see. There was not a lot of trees. There's a few brown sites down here, and there's a few 60s and 70s places with the odd little tree. But then suddenly, there's big trees in small spaces, and that's what I want to sort of get across a little bit tonight. You can have a big tree in a small space. You don't have to fear a big tree. I think we talked about, someone was talking about pipes. Hazel. Yes, we're talking about pipes and, which trees that you can use. And you spent 10 years down at Christie's Beach worrying about what tree to put in. Then the 10 years have passed and you still haven't worked out because you're worried about pipes. But really, clearly, these people aren't worried about anything, and they shouldn't really be. And believe it or not, I couldn't get a better shot, but if you go around the side, they've actually got that many trees out the backyard as well. It's insane. It's really incredible. Well, I think they hate it because they've moved out, see? Yeah. They probably don't like it at all. Yeah. Yeah, well, that is the challenge. As humans, we need to balance, the social part of that. But that's where trees can get neighbours talking, and we should be talking about our environment together and managing our environment together. I like trees, but not in my yard, sort of. And then you got someone next to it with, I love trees, I don't care. There's two extremes, for sure, noted. But that's a ridiculous situation. It's not really what we're advocating for everywhere, but how good. We're going to diverge to people's attitudes to fire and trees and what they might believe or not believe. In 2011, there was a Development Act or Development Regs variation to do with regulated trees, and that sent us mad. It sent the environmental fraternity and all the arborists but even the CFS, it sent them hopping mad as well. In response to that, I'll just give you a quick background. What happened was they took out a critical fire assessment. When you were lodging to remove a significant tree on the basis of fire, it had to go to the CFS first, and the CFS refused 90% of those applications to remove large trees from blocks because they were a fire hazard. And that was a really good educational campaign. We had to, we tried to go, we lobbied Parliament, we even went to Parliament through a few independent members as well. Bob Such helped us out with that. Michelle Lensing, she helped us out with that. And we went to Parliament with the CFS, some high-ranking officials in the CFS, just to try and say, look, we've got to put that back in because it was sending the wrong message. So in those regulations saying that you can remove a tree within 20 metres of any dwelling in a bushfire hazard, a high bushfire area, people just went bananas. They thought that was a direction from the state government to say, cut your trees down because you'll burn to death, right? So unfortunately, people took that as a de facto direction from the state government. And the CFS say, no, it's not the trees, it's all the fine fuel. So people were leaving their chook sheds, they weren't cutting their grass, they're leaving rubbish around, but they cut their tree down. But that was the wrong thing. So in response to that, after we went to Parliament, nothing happened. They came up with, I'll put my little laser pointer down. We had a little booklet made up, and in that booklet, trees are not your enemy. They can trap embers, reduce wind speeds, and act as radiant heat shields. So in a bushfire, they're actually quite handy to have a tree. So as long as you've got, what they tell us, a vertical fuel break of 2 metres. So that's a fuel break from the ground up 2 metres. The fire generally just rushes straight under the tree and doesn't trouble the scorer while it's burning your chook sedge and your grass and whatever else you've left as a fine fuel. And what a fine fuel is anything 6 mil in diameter, so roughly about your thumb or below. That's the stuff you worry about. That's what carries fire. But you might. This is what can confuse people. So this is a result. I don't know where this location is, by the way, but this is a result typical of open woodland fires. Now, have a good look at that. What's burnt and what hasn't burnt. It's sure as isn't the trees. So the trees haven't carried the fire in that situation. It's just all the grass and all the fine fuel. And the only thing that hasn't burnt in this situation is the trees. So if that was a house block in a rural place in the hills, just about bet your bottom dollar everything else will be burnt, including possibly the house and the sheds, but the trees won't be burnt. I know where this one is. We had some fires through. This is from the Woodside fires a year and a half ago. Harrogate Road, 2020. Have a look at that. So you can see and this is a fire that claimed lives. It burnt sheds, it burnt houses. A lot of people and a lot of fences went down too. But you can see there, where's the damage? The fire hasn't burnt the trees, or the trees haven't carried that fire. So therefore the trees weren't a bushfire hazard in a bushfire prone area. This is still the same situation. So this is out at Harrogate. People have also got this impression that pines blow up and they burn. Well, they don't. Only in a forest situation they'll do that. So this is the fire went under these pines, scorched their bases. Some of the roots burnt for days, even weeks. And we went out there and tried to pull some of these pines over. We still couldn't pull them over. So the trees weren't a hazard even after that much damage. They were fine. Noted that 2/3 of that cemetery, this is the Harrogate Cemetery, the pines eventually have died, and we're pulling them out, but they certainly weren't a risk or a fire risk. Okay, what does burn is the hollow trees. So hollow trees burn afterwards for days or weeks, quite often, but they're not actually carrying the fire. They're not a bushfire hazard. So we spent a week or two going around and putting these things out and seeing if they're going to stand up and stay standing up. Here's where trees burn. This is about 2 or 3 nights after the fire. This is up Bloomingdale Road in Harrogate. What happens is the fire's long gone. There's a few embers around, or the grass has got hot. It's just sparked up around the base of the tree, and then slowly the tree catches the light on the inside. It starts a chimney. It starts to suck. I've got a little red pointer here. So you got a hollow at the bottom. It just acts as a big chimney and it just sucks in, like almost like a blast furnace, and it just carries the fire until the tree actually falls over eventually. So that is a problem for mopping up for a few weeks later. Yeah. All right, so that's the trees. Hopefully I've busted a myth about fire and trees there a little bit. So the only let's go back one. So trees aren't a bushfire hazard, right? Trees will burn wholly and solely in a closed forest situation. So in a closed forest, and you see those images on the news in New South Wales and all those fires when they happen, and they're in a dense forest. The fire carries up. There's no fuel break. It starts to burn, but because it's in a closed situation, it creates its own oven situation almost. And the hotter it gets, and it just goes right up, creates its own wind, starts rolling over the top. It does burn trees in that situation. But so if you're living in a forest, that's a problem. Yeah, but if you're living in an open woodland, it's not a problem. And if you're living in an urban area in the Adelaide Hills, your tree is not a bushfire hazard. That's the main thing. So I'm a little bit upset about that state government. It's almost like a little faux pas there. Anyway, greenfields land development. So this is about big trees for small spaces. So what we do here, look, people seem to think in Mount Barker that we've cut all these trees down and put houses up. It's not. We've put houses on paddocks and kept all the big trees where we can. So not a lot of it does get removed. So this is out at Spring Lake. These are really awesome trees, and we make the developer have at least a truck width between the edge of the canopy of these things and the next residential boundary, just so there's no neighbour problems. And those trees are now public trees, so no one can cut them down. They're in public ownership, so anyone that lives there can walk up to the trees and touch them. They're theirs. They don't have to pay for them or worry about them. That's the secret. All right. They can't be cut down on a fearful whim. This slide here just sort of lays out where some of the roads might go. This is actually not Spring Lake's over here. We kept quite a few nice trees over there. It's big trees for small spaces. That's what it is. So we got a lot of links, engineering links to retain these things. So we'll use a hydrovac to work out where we're going to put curbs and where we're going to put the pipes. Put fences around them and keep the big machinery off the root plates. But these are now public trees in public ownership. The public owns those trees, which is the key, I think. How do we simulate? This is significant remnant retention and simulation on public land. This is I love this slide, and I want you to get your head around this. You can't see what you can't see, and people can't see the roots, so that it's out of sight, out of mind, okay? But what we do, we got this tree sensitive gig going on here where you don't strip the land, you don't strip it down too much. You make sure you are venting the ground under your pavements. So even the road, that's a tree sensitive road. Now we've got a tree sensitive walkway. This road here and this walkway here go past this, that's on that alignment. Look at this red gum here. That's got its tree sensitive treatment. It's green as. There used to be an ad on for smokers that says pick the smoker. Do you remember that one? Pick the smoker. There's a healthy person. All right, we'll pick the smoker out of these two trees. All right. Healthy red gum was one, but no. So this one didn't. This has got standard civil treatments past it. Everything's standard. But we did, to be fair to the developer, we said that's the one you can remove. And they said, oh, look, we don't want to remove it. I know we've got permission to remove it. We'll just do it. We'll just damage it and then leave it there. Kudos to them. They left it there, but it was a good way to show them that this is why we do this and that's why we don't do that. It has come back since this photo a little bit, but it's never going to be as good as that. So there you go. So there's a tree-sensitive roadway there. You wonder what that's actually a roadway built on top of the ground on this venting. It's a gap-graded aggregate. It's rock. So you get your load-bearing capacity and your venting, and then the two can meet. It's a CO2 vent. So basically the first rule in not dying for all cellular biology, that's you, me, the trees, everything, is it's oxygen in, CO2 out. The first rule of not dying is venting CO2. You have to get the CO2 out and away because you'll die if you can't. So if you stand in a cupboard with a paper bag, you're breathing away. What do you need? You need to get rid of that CO2 or have a glass of water. It's actually getting rid of the CO2. It's nothing to do with the water. So the fact that it's got an impervious top, it's not letting water through the top, but what it's doing is the first rule of not dying, which is venting the CO2 out of the root plate. And that's through this rocks and out the corner of these tree-sensitive road features. Here's a about 120-year-old heritage mulberry tree at Dan Murphy's up at Mount Barker. Dan Murphy's, they were great. They said, all right, we'll keep it. If you really want us to keep it, you sure you want us to keep it? Yeah, we want to keep it. So this is in the Dan Murphy's car park, but it's one of these is built, a CO2 vent to vent the root plate of this tree so that it can keep living for many, many more decades, hopefully. But rest assured, moisture does leak in from the side, and there's groundwater movement, and roots can transport, believe it or not, they can take water from one side of they can put straws in their glass over there where there's dry roots, and they can actually shift moisture to that dry root. But that root can still breathe. It's still got its head out of the cupboard. It's still got the CO2 coming out, bubbling out. And I like to use the analogy when I'm talking to these guys on site, the developers, and they go, or the civil guys, what are we doing this for? They don't understand it. But a good way to get it to you is, you got a bottle of Coke, right? It's full of the fizz, which is CO2, right? You take the lid off the Coke, the Coke goes flat. That's what we do with these tree-sensitive roadways. We're leaving the lid off the Coke and letting all the CO2 bubble out of the ground, out of the root plate. If we seal it traditionally, as like that, what we're doing is screwing the lid back on the Coke bottle and trapping all that CO2 in the ground, holding the fizz in, and the tree suffers for that because of the CO2 poisoning it's receiving in the ground. So that's one of the things to think about. So these have been in for about 10 years. They're working really well. I'd encourage developers to keep using the CO2 vent. This is where you guys might be a bit more interested. Tree buying instructions. So you might have come, you're all gardeners. I know some of you want to be better gardeners and starting gardeners, and you've got a tree, and you might go and buy a tree after tonight and put it in your backyard. The slide says, the 2015, the year of empowerment, establishing a common language for defining quality. Now, it's a standard. It was developed in 2015. There is a new version out now. It's 2018. The 2018 version is this one. It's the same as the 2015 version. It's about, why do we need this? Why do we need it? There's always been this innocent thing with the nursery trade. Well, you can't see, you don't know what it is. The thing is, if it's in the pot, the roots you can't see. It's all about, people shop above the pot, don't they? They go, oh, I love that, and I'll take it home and put it in the ground without actually sort of knowing about some of those container-induced root defects, which I'm mad for because we will see in a minute. But let's talk about this. But where I'm going with this little comment is there's been an innocent ignorance in the nursery industry. That's from the customer, but also the nursery person as well. It's okay. Buy it, whack it in, should be right. It's not that. It's not buy it, whack it in, should be right. There is a quality. There's a biological and physiological property you have to that defines success or not. And it's stipulated in our standards. So we've got Australian standard, which thank God we've got Australian standard for this, because unless you've got a standard for something, no one really wants to. They just think you're talking about magic unicorns and fairies and whatever. But you can go, no, actually, no, this is a real thing. This is true. And when you're talking to project groups, you've got a standard. You bring your standard along and say, well, you don't bring your standard along, but you can say, hang on, we've got to check this in the QA process because we've got an Australian standard for it. And there's a reason for that. All right. That's good. So this is where it gets cool. So the modern realisations is rethink shopping above the pot, right? Don't go into a nursery. Always rethink just buying the top. Always probe deeper, have a look. Because container-induced root defects, you can see an array of them there, and we'll get close to those in a minute. They impact on growth and establishment rates. So something that's slightly pot-bound might just be okay and not fall over and not die, but it will just be slow, and you're wondering, you're scratching your head, and that's when you get too involved. You go and put fertiliser on it too much, or you water it too much, and you're thinking, why isn't this thing not growing? It's because it's got container-induced root defects a lot of the time. Not always, but a lot of the time. It has bigger resource inputs because you're there throwing your money in fertiliser and your time and scratching your head and watering it more. Its long-term stability is affected, and the time, look, another way I try and explain, healthy roots. You need healthy roots for healthy shoots. It's an easy little sort of grab line. If you have not healthy roots, you won't have healthy shoots, but you won't know why because you can't see them, and you'll give up. You'll think you blame yourself. You'll blame your watering regime. You'll blame borers. You'll blame everything under the sun except. So what I want you to do, what I want to encourage you to do is, you've got a failure in the garden, even if it's a small. Dig it up, have a look, and if it looks like this, if it looks like that, or if it looks like this when you wash it off, or whatever, you know it wasn't you. You know it was the container-induced root defect. So get smart about that. So above the pot, there's a lot of nit. There's a lot of the standard took a while to get going. There's a lot of nitpicking above the pot. A lot of arguments about this. Here we go. This is what we're talking about. Well, what about climate variation and growth, twigs and buds, self-supporting stems, root and shoot balance, the size index, yada yada yada. So that was, and my point here is all we should be caring about is page 14 and 15. So the most relevant to your success, this is for you people, is page 14 and 15. Particularly the item 4.3 in the standard, which is, we'll bring it up. It's mandatory in our QA process. So shift your focus away from what's above the pot, and other considerations with the standard are secondary and take care of themselves where quality is in the container. So once again, healthy roots, healthy shoots. If you've got a really good root system, a good containerised root system, you've got a Formula One tree, it's going to perform for you. You've got less of everything, like the way it grows after that will take care of itself if you've got good roots. Simple as that. Really good. Critical assessments. So the height of the root crown. So let's get over here and get dirty. In the pot, what we like to see. So this is the root crown. So where the tree sort of fattens up, that's the root crown, and the height of that in the pot's critical. So sometimes in a nursery, when you pot things up, they put the soil all the way up here and the roots all the way down the bottom of the pot. That's very critical. Circling roots should not be present. So if you see, like we've got these are first order roots, they're circling around. And J roots, I'll flick this. This is a bit too technical to read through, but we'll get dirty on this one and show you the real examples. So the height of the root crown, there it is. I didn't have to go over there to the table because you can see the root crown's about there. And that was a good one, right? That was a good one. That was potted quite well. But here, the root crown's all the way down there. So you got this poor old tree that's started its roots down the bottom of the pot. The roots are going to have to go, oh, where's the top, where's the surface? So they go around there. But when they go around, they go up the sides of the pot and all around the trunk. Most people would buy that tree and plant it, and they'd put the soil level there, which is a not a death sentence, but it's a very disappointing next 20 years of your life waiting for your tree to grow, So you got to be careful about that one. 3/4 down the pot, that's not good. Here it is. So 4.3.7, root direction. You want to avoid a J root, you want to avoid circling, and you want to avoid kinks, and you want to avoid gurgle. I've got examples of those. You can go and touch them later on. So that is out of this standard. It's $70 from Standards Australia, or you could probably get in touch with your council and go and have a look at one, or borrow one for the library even, if you want to really have a look at that. It's easy light reading, 29 pages. It's not too bad, but of those 29 pages, pages 14 and 15 are the most important. Forget about the rest. All right, 2 pages to read. Here we go. So root direction, examples of that. Look, jacaranda. Who loves jacarandas? I love jacarandas, but I had to pull these ones out because look at that. They weren't performing. And silly me, I didn't check. And this is before the standard, by the way. I knew there was something up, but circling. So that's a 150 ml pot. That's like that, right? And that was sold to us as a 400 ml. Expensive and dodgy. So we spent money on something dodgy, right? You don't want to do that. This was even more dodgy. This is a 200 litre bag, beautiful tree, an Agathis robusta Queensland carry, love them. They're so nice. But you can see it's really only an 8-inch Queensland carry in a 200 ml bag. You can see that the way they're all circling around there, they haven't really got out. That's not the same tree, that's a tube. Be careful of tube stock. Tube stock can be left way too long. This is an excellent one, so this is compliant with the standard. It's quality root system, AS2303 4.3.7 compliant. Look, so I've got my fingers under the root crown. The root crown was at the top of the pot. Fantastic. And you can see this is complementing natural processes. So natural processes, how a tree grows, you're going to have it beautiful buttress roots. It's out and down. It's not buried and around. That's the way to go. That's how you shop for a nice tree. So when you're shopping around, don't just do that. I don't know how many people, I used to do it. You go to a nursery, if you get a bit brave, you just tap the pot off, don't you? You go, oh, that looks all right. And you get a bit confident, I'll buy that. But no, because you can't see anything when you do that, because back here is where the defects are. So if you've got a tube, so for instance, I'll tell you what, hang on, where are we? That's tube stock on the right-hand side. That, see all those defects at a tube size, right? That would show up like that on the outside. So you got no idea, right? That could be a little pot-bound tube in there like that. That's how you do it. Like, just check. If you're going to buy 100 of these things, just wash one off and have a look. That's beautiful, right? You can see there's the first order root, there's the tap, or the ceiling root. Let's call it tap root. Let's call it the ceiling root. Beautiful down, out and down. There's no defects in that one. Fantastic. On the end there, that's good. But when you got bigger stock, all you have to do is, it's not onerous. It's not destructive. Like, you don't do that only if you're buying 100. If you're buying, that doesn't take long to do. That's really quick. That just blows it off. So you can see the height of the root crown in the container. Tick, big tick, right? If you're digging down, you can't find the root crown, suspect input, right? So that's high in the pot. Beautiful. And the roots, the first order roots are out and down. There's 3 kind of roots really. First orders are the big woody ones. The second orders are those little sort of ropey ones like that. And the thirds are the little hairy guys, right? They do the absorbing of all the soil, the solids and nutrients and stuff. Shopping techniques continuing. This is non-destructive using compressed air. It only took 2 minutes. Bang, look at that. That's natural processes, all right? That's an excellent quality stock. Root buttress is high in the pot. You've got first to seconds to thirds. They're all going as they would in as Mother Nature would create it for us. Very good. Out and down. First to seconds to thirds. All going the right way. This one's a bit sus. See how, oh my gosh, they're going back. So what this tree would have been grown in a smaller container. Those second orders would have found the edge of the container and bent back inwards. So this could be something you might not buy. Okay, field examples. This is good. All right. This is in a development in Mount Barker. That's a Zelkova. That tree would have cost $500 to $600, right? And it's been in the ground for 5 years. A big windstorm came through. It stopped growing, and then they blew over. They pretty much all just sort of blew over. We thought, oh, what's going on? That is actually this one here. So you can see that. It actually never got. Believe it or not, we actually pulled some up in a root control bag still. They actually planted it in the pot, so to speak. But no good. They were grown in these bags, and what the bags do, they force the root system to mature in the wrong alignment against what nature would do, and then that never fixes itself. Sure, you've got an advanced tree, but that tree is going to be that size forever before it dies, and it did. So be careful of that. So advanced trees aren't always good. They can be if they're cultured well, but this one's not. So the developer had to pay a bond, and we had to replace all the trees. So you can see here, there's a lot of, see that real beautiful circular shape? Those roots aren't going anywhere. These trees failed. This is a good example because this is a funny story I want to tell you, and it's kind of harsh reality, but it's good. So we went through. This is 2010, so 11 years ago. We put new 45 litre whipsticks, and on a very big tree. It's like a $120 tree in a pot, 45 litre pot. It's about that big. It's like a stick, doesn't look really impressive, so it doesn't have that appeal. But 2010, we put these little. Just take note of how big that is. I call this one the Insistence Tree, because this person who lives here saw us coming, said, I want to stick with mine, I insist I want to keep going with my tree. Left it there, right? We replanted the whole street, and then 2016, so 6 years later, it was dead, right? And look, compare the two. Same tree. Okay, it's put a bit more thickness and a few more leaves on, but it hasn't really done anything, has it? Like same. So it hasn't grown. It's just got a bit thicker. It's one of those root balls. And then there we go. This is a great example because in 2016, these are the 45-litre whips we put. See that? Look at the size of that tree. Healthy, growing canopy. See that? And there is one of these numbers. You know, all that time, and it's really a time loss injury rather than an economic failing. It's economic loss, but it's the time loss which we don't all have, right? We're running out of time for this, but there you go. You plant a good, healthy root system. Healthy roots equal healthy shoots. Look at that. That's a big tree in 6 years. It's outgrown the size of that would have been if it stayed alive. Oh, look at all the trees down the street. So there's a good example of. As a quick one here, this is I'll just sort of whiz through these a little bit. Who loves a spotted gum? I love a spotted gum. Mad for them. They're great. So we whipped these in Parkview. So we put them in 2011. 2 years later, they blew over. Okay, what's going on? All right, we'll see what's going on. We dug a few up and look at that. No roots, because back at the tube stage, they had got those defects, those container-induced defects, way back at the early potting up stages. Look at that. So how can a tree that size be that size with that many with roots doing that? Look at that. Incredible, huh? Look at that on the end there. So we only lost a couple of years there, but look, they do not change their alignment, and they produce. Here's what we do. Part of our QA process. We make developers show us that they've got good stock that going into public streets, and send us an example. We'll approve the rest. We'll approve everything. This was one that was a good one, right? But they selected the rest of them from a different batch. So we ticked this one, but actually we got the rest from another batch. So yeah, these are all look like dead soldiers lined up on the side of a battlefield, but that's exactly what they were. We just had to send them back. Sorry, you can't plant those. And you can see there the first orders all bending around like that. This was a 400 mil tree, so that was sold to the developer as that's a $200 tree, but it was really an 8 mil. So there you go. That's an 8-inch pot, 200 mil, and you can see how pot bound that is. Here's some supersized examples of that. And this is a time loss injury. So this is down in yours. This is Brighton Road. Do you recognise these trees? All right. And you might even remember the storm that came through and skittled these ones. These are, once again, spotted gum. The highways department put them in. But, yeah, look, they were pretty much just pot bound, but also put in these. It's the way they were planted in these like root directors. They can just the tiny plastic vaults, which kept the roots small. The top kept growing a little bit. No roots equals no support as well, and they blew over. So that's just a hell of a time loss injury. There's Joseph Murchison from Burnside, looking devastated about ripping a street of those out. Look at the pot bound. Look at that. Yeah. This was apparently a claret ash, which is big enough to be up in the wires, the electric wires. But look at the roots that had on it. That's a solid piece of timber, just all matted together with nothing going out in the environment at all. Onkaparinga, a whole street of Yuki dwarfs came out just because they're all pot bound. So, people see that in the street. We're living in hope that they'll have big trees soon, and they see them all ripped out or blown over, and there's another time loss injury. So we've got to be cognizant of the time we're spending on this. And there you go. There's a lot of rates going through a chipper, but more so the time loss. It was terrible. So the key principles in all of that, which I want to get at, the containerised root defects are more common than you might think. Defective first order roots don't change their alignment. We talked about that. Trees with severe first order defects struggle to establish and will often fail, as we've seen. Trees with mild defects display growth, which is slow, restricted, and often ultimately limited. So it might not fall over or die, but it just sort of stops growing. You sort of think, oh, it stopped, and that's when you worry about what you're doing to it or not doing to it, and then you write the species off or you write your own management off. So here we go. Amateurs and professionals often blame the species selection, which is not the right thing to blame. Planting site or management, rather than discovering the disappointment was with the container-induced root defects. So don't be that guy. Don't be the guy in the statue. I don't want you to be them. We can get around that now. Here's where some famous people helped me out with this presentation. You might recognise this fella. So when you're shopping, like forgive them for they don't know what they do, meaning that don't go in there guns blazing, and they might not know. They might not actually understand this stuff. They might not actually have their head around this, yet. So just go in there with a bit of grace, I suppose. And there's our fella holding a bit of a pot-bound tree. Just be careful. Why do we have this attitude? Because this type of stock scrutiny is relatively new. Nurseries have been doing what they do for many decades. They're often quite defensive. How dare you think that my stock's bad, all that sort of stuff. I've been doing this. My grandpa did this. Look, whatever. Let them be upset. Totally understand that. Let them be upset a little bit at first, but just be patient and courteous. But most importantly, take responsibility for the root morphology that you want. You want a good tree. You're buying it. You want a good tree. And then develop respectful relationships, because what we've found with all this is that growers now, they love us. They love us coming back and buying stock from them. They've improved their product. So it doesn't take long, and even you can do that with your local nursery. You just be clued up. You've heard about this standard, which the girls here will help you with later on online. You'll be able to find it. Even a little boutique nursery that hasn't got their head around it will think, oh, this is great. So you can be part of the solution of the education. Carl Sagan, you don't want to believe, you want to know. So don't just go on hearsay. This is a great nursery, or go and buy from them. You don't want to just believe you're buying something. You want to know you're buying something good, all right? Because you can't see it, you end up believing it's okay. You don't. You're operating on belief, and that's dangerous. All right. So you should shop for trees. You don't need one of those. You don't need the lunar lander for that, but you need that attitude. Don't believe, find out. So don't shop on reputation alone. No nursery, even a good one, is immune to dud or poor quality batches. Get the pre-commitment evidence of quality before you buy it. You can, if you're a council, you can remotely achieve that. Ideally, you visit the nursery and do a check with the grower before you buy hundreds of these things. So stop believing and get busy knowing. Albert Einstein, he said, look deep into nature, then you'll understand everything better. So look deep into nature. Just stand back, take it in. Look for the root crown height in the container. First thing you do, look for that height. If you can find the root crown, yes, it's probably going to be good. Chase those first order roots from the root crown, observing the orientation and the divisions. So if it looks natural, out and down, you're on a winner. If it's tied up like this, or it's hit the side of the pot, gone back in, don't buy it. Buy something else. Buy a gift voucher, come back, whatever. These are just more. This is good. You're not going to do this. I don't expect anyone to do this, but this is just washing off to show good ones. That's a really good. That's a good spotted gum with its a nice tap root, bearded roots like that. That's a calitris doing a perfect calitris thing. That's an exotic. I think it's a Norwegian maple, but that's sort of. It's not ideal, but it's still doing the right thing. It's sort of down and out. No problem with that one. Here we go. This is how we do it. This is like when you're buying large trees like that. It takes 5 seconds to blow it off. Have a look at the root crown. Yep, excellent. Division's good. Nothing's going around. That's very, very good. So that's step 1 of the QA process. Step 2 is planning. So planning meetings. Check the stock. Predict. And sometimes it's predictable. You can actually manipulate some of this stuff. You can actually really, if it's okay, it's like 10% dodgy. You can fix that. You can clip it out and then plan it. So, but you have to look at it first. And you go through these specifics with planning with landscapers and that. And here's one. This is like a big, expensive plane tree that we've had to snip all these adventitious roots off. Found the root crown that far down. We can still use the tree because the root crown was on that far down, and we can snip off all the dodgy roots, then plant it, and we fluffed up the edges of it, and then it's good. It's good as gold. Good to go. So it's you don't always have to buy a perfect tree, although you try to. But if it's salvageable, then it's okay. The hole is very important. Always dig a shallow walk hole, 3 times the width of the root ball, and only the depth of it. Don't dig big post holes. We used to do that in the 70s, 80s. We were wrong. Science tells us we've got to go. Science has shown us that roots go that way. Roots don't go down, right? They go that way from the root plate. They send sinkers down eventually, but largely roots they travel horizontally across the earth, like they don't go down. You don't want them to go down. Hazel, you were talking about shallow-rooted species before. All trees are sort of essentially the same. This is the open ground planting technique, so we'll just go through this quickly, guys, and this is just going to help you. So this is the ideal way to do things. Open ground, it's a big sort of walk-shaped hole, like what we saw back here. We've gone bananas with this one a little bit, but that's good. That was a good hole. And you can see how we've found here where the root crown is. We shaved off about 10 litres of soil to find that root crown. We planted that height. We don't see where the soil was up there. The rest of the roots were good. First, seconds, and thirds, all good, right alignment, like nature does it, except it was too deep. All we did was find that root crown. We planted at that height, no problem at all. You don't always have to stake them either. This one's got stakes on it because it's in the public realm. Often it just helps from vandalism and people bumping into them and blowing over as well in the first few months of their life. There's your shallow walk hole. So there's your root, your containerised root mass, but obviously take the container off. The top of that's 3 times the width, but it's only the depth of it. All right. So it's only 3 times the width at the top, and at the bottom it's only the width of the container. So it's not a very big hole. You don't have to spend hours out there digging and digging and digging. It's a scrape. It's a walk shape, pretty much. When there's nowhere to plant trees, this is what we can do. So this is a non-load-bearing tree trench. So we've got some large trees. I haven't got a contemporary photo of that, but these trees are booming now. This is about 10 years ago. You should see them now in that very, very narrow space. So this is called a tree trench. You need a tree trench. If you need to be load-bearing, you can have load-bearing tree trenches. So you can plant trees in the most ridiculous spot. You can have a large tree in no space at all if you plant it like this in rock. We worked out that there's 50% pore space between these rocks, and you can drop a fire truck on that and have roots. It's amazing. So here we go. We're putting in these are load-bearing tree trenches in an urban precinct in Nan. So you can have trees growing and you can have cars parking on top of these trenches. You can have people walking on top of these trenches. It's a beautiful thing. Curbing going in on top of the rock. And this is in one of the precincts in Mount Barker Central. So it's a load-bearing vault. This gets filled up with these cells. I don't like the cells as much as the rock, but the cells, I guess, are expensive. But that provides a load-bearing capacity and space for tree roots. Roots equals shoots. So if you want a large tree, you have to have a large root volume. Okay? You got a tiny constricted root volume, you will not have a large tree. And in these urban precincts, what do you want? You want canopy, you want shade, you want impressive, you want tourists, don't you? All that sort of stuff. Structural soil or dirty rocks, so we've used that quite a bit. That's just a mixture of a gap-graded aggregate, so like a similar size aggregate that locks together with voids with a bit of compost and sand in between. That provides enough for the tree. Here we go. This is another part of what you can do with your trees and what not. And some people, you don't have to remove your tree. If your tree gets storm damaged and you want to, it's still a positive urban feature if you can retain it and put in. We put chainsaw hollows in. So this is a natural. Oh, sorry, whoopsie. This is a chainsaw hollow. It looks natural. We put a camera on it so we can catch birds using it. Look, there's a rosella there. You wouldn't know there's an artificial hollow created in that. See that little rosella there? We made that. That's made. Arborist made that. We cut a box. We cut a thing out the back of it. What you do is, there's an example of it. You cut a face off. Then you plunge cut with a chainsaw. You make a nice box, and then you tech screw that back on, and you wouldn't know. And then you create an entrance hole. So, even dead trees are valuable to do that in. Because, it's sure as hell, it takes you years to get a tree to that size to be able to function for urban biodiversity, for habitat. Look, you can go pardalote size. We've got this down here. There's a massive hollow on that, an artificial hollow. You can just put them. You can fill a tree up with these chainsaw hollows. You're saying that, love your leaves, I love you. Why do we love urban trees because they create cleaner living environments. They're good for economic prosperity, physical and mental well-being, social resilience, believe it or not. Higher real estate values, we all know that. That's an easy one. Burnside, Mitcham. Urban biodiversity. And you know that the lower social economic areas with no trees, they have all those other issues. It's areas with trees is where there's more empowered humanity. More trees, the better, basically. So thanks for listening. We might just talk about some of those defects, and I've got an idea. I'll show you how to. We've got a couple of minutes, haven't we? A couple of minutes. We'll go over here. We've got
Sure, are there any
how can I answer your questions? How can I answer your questions? You got some questions? Hopefully, got some answers.
I've got a question.
Yeah, go for it.
You know the green wells that you see around the place?
Yeah.
I'm sort of like, they are a bit like a plastic tub, I suppose.
Yeah.
Are they a good thing or a bad thing?
We don't
Not specifically that brand, obviously. But
no, so watering. This is called watering collars, plastic watering collars. They're good where you've got, say, you can't, like veggie gardens. Maybe if you got something, if you can't keep water on a surface, or if you've got a special tree on a hill, or you just can't water it. Sure, put your plastic collar around it, but try not to use one if you don't have to. So where you've got flat ground, councils are mad. They spend rates on these plastic things. They could actually do a proper hole with mulch in it, like a proper nice mulching well, instead of this tiny little plastic collar. The things with those things is often they've got 3 panels, and they last for 2 weeks. As soon as one of those panels is broken, the watering truck comes along, can't put water anyway, it just runs down the street, and it's cost another $50 on the inside, or however it costs. They're handy for your little herbaceous gardens, or if you've got a special tree. I've actually got a couple at home I use on a certain spot just so that I can get a bit of water to stay on a slope. But they do act as a container and juice. I have in the Wade Arboretum. They were trialled there for a while, and I've had a look at a few roots going round and round because the watering collar has been installed way too deeply, so you get the tree coming out, hitting the sides of that, going round and round. Because roots don't go down, roots go out before they go down. So, look, I want to show you. This is another way of shopping, and you could have one of these in your handbag, right, or a pencil when you go shopping at Bunnings or your favourite little. Here we go, and I'll show you ways of just a couple of minutes of the show and tell. This we know this one here. He's been in. You can feel it. You can come in and feel it, touch it later on. You can feel how tight it is. But what you want to use one of these numbers for is you use this to try and see how far you can get into the root mass with. And if it stops under the trunk like it's doing there, you know what we're hitting. We're hitting some defects. Not like that's different. That's completely different. We've got one here somewhere. That one's not great. So, yeah, that one's pretty good. Like you can see. So that was where the soil level would have been, but you're going to be hitting some defective roots around there. That's not a great example, really. But what I'm trying to say is it's probably a pot-bound tube there. So you know to leave that one alone. See that? You can't get it through. But tested at a few spots because you might go, oh, okay, Lawry, that's the seedling root. But the seedling root wouldn't be that tough, right? You've hit something very woody there. And at a tree that size, you don't want to be doing that. But give it a couple of goes, and see how I'm not destroying the stock either. So you can surreptitiously put it back, but do it at a couple of heights because you might try and get that one through. But I'll be putting that back, and so put that back in your handbag quickly. Put that back like that, and it goes back on the shelf. But hopefully the nursery person's seen you do that and interested in what you're doing and why you're doing it, right? I want to compare it, and you saw how hard that was to get that through. I reckon that was stopping on a lot of wood, and that's got a lot of root defects. Looks fine above the pot, but it wouldn't perform as well as this one. This one's a bit more fresher. That's a good sign, by the way. So if you're getting a bit of soil potting mix come out with your tree like that, you know it hasn't, and it feels lighter. It hasn't got that real heavy, dense feeling about it. Maybe a knitting needle or something. And if you can get it to go through easily under the stem like that, you're not feeling any woody roots, look at that. You know that's good to go. And that's a non-destructive, it's a very simple thing to do. Test it at a few heights, so, you know, not too, I mean, if you go too close to the trunk, you won't want to do that. So about that height, and then down further on the same alignment. And, you know, if you really want to go again, just test in there. That's good. And we haven't actually made a mess except for that, right? Or, you know, you haven't made a song and dance at the nursery. Because it's a bit embarrassing. I mean, jeez. These ones though, so when you're shopping for big trees, that's a $14 outlay. You know, it's a couple of cups of coffee. But when you're starting to buy, that's probably a $40 tree. Look at this one. How's that? And you can see the first order roots going around like that. Very dense. That would have been potted up too low because that's the bottom of the pot, right? See that? The bottom of the pot. The root crown has been put to the bottom of the pot, and that would have been up there somewhere. The pot would have been about that tall. All right, so hasn't given the right opportunities, and when you walk up to that, you can just see it's just all bent around itself. This one, you've seen what that would have been a $500 tree, but I'd hate to think how much dollars spent on maintenance contractors trying to water it, and you know it's just horrible. And the carbon. Let's talk about carbon. All those truck movements and all that stuff in the atmosphere, but the tree's not there to take it all back. Look at that. Look at those defects. Look at that. There's the bottom of the container, size of the container. These are big first order roots. That's why that failed. This one, you know, this is an evergreen. So evergreens are a bit different to look at than deciduous stock in big pots. But still, if you're looking at evergreens, I mean, and particularly, I mean, stuff like that, you can't see a root crown. But often you can see a lignotuber or something like that. That's too small to have a root crown yet. So it's probably going to be fine. But, you know, stuff like that, when you buy something, you'll be able to find a root crown in a pot like that. But you can see it's had a small container for too long at some stage, all right? That failed. That got crook and died and blew over. But that was only a 5-year disappointment, not a 10-year disappointment. The 10-year disappointments hurt more. This is a good one to look at. This one's even got the shape of the pot in the bottom. Look at that one. So those are turned into first order roots in the shape of the mold shape of the container itself. So when you're looking for those types of defects, we had a bit of a show and tell up there, but you know, you haven't got an air compressor. If you're going to spend $200 on a tree, get the nursery person to help you with that. But you can have a sniff around yourself. So all I do is just for instance, if that was the tree, we'd be just finding the root crown a little bit in one spot, and what we try and do is find the first height of the first order root, and follow that to the edge of the container. But if it's to the edge of the container, almost to the edge of the container, and it divides naturally, like we commonly in natural processes, it's good to go, and then you can just pretty much confidently walk up and buy it. But then if you find it bends back in, and then you might have a bit more of a look. Oh, that's interesting. Look, you find some circling ones, and by that time you probably spent too long, and you want to sort of walk away. But that's pretty much this one's not too bad actually. Like that wasn't a good example before but you can see that it's been too deep, and you can see that it's been sat too deep, and then all these ones are bent back in. You still wouldn't want to buy that. But if you did buy that, the main structure of it, see how it's sort of out and down. So it's where it's been cut out of the ground. It's been like a whipstick cut out of the ground and potted. So they bare root these deciduous. They grow in bare root in paddocks in Victoria, pull them out of the ground. The nursery trade in South Australia buys them and pots them up. But typically they just shove them right down the bottom of the pot like that, right? And it hasn't got anywhere to go. So the soil would have been up there, the roots down there, and you can see it's all bending around like that. So that's not... If you ended up with that, if you got one home, you thought, let's just wash it off, have a look before I plant it, which you can do with the deciduous stuff, you go, oh my God, all right, either take it back, or you could snip all those bendy bits off, cross your fingers and whistle and plant it, as long as you've got everything not bending back in. But I'd take it back first. All right, can I answer your questions? Is there any questions we want to talk about, or any other at all? There's got to be some. You've got to have questions. Burning questions?
I've got a question.
Yes.
In relation to watering trees.
Yep.
What's your suggestion so that they grow good roots and are stable for the long term?
Yep. Okay. So once again, complement natural processes. Underground watering systems and stakes, not so good because you're not complement. It's not Mother Nature. So what does nature do best? Do that. So water's got to percolate from the surface down through the root ball. So water's got to go ideally delivered on the surface. It percolates down gravitational water. So gravity pulls the water down to the center of the earth. It acts like a syringe in a like a hospital syringe. So as the water's coming down the soil profile, it's pushing out the CO2 and spent gases, and also drawing behind it, like a plunger in a syringe, it's drawing behind it atmospheric gases. So a fresh dose of nitrogen, oxygen, all that sort of stuff. That's why it's best to deliver water at the surface and not, how many TV shows you've seen with people doing these funny little things with bits of plastic under the ground, and it's just not, you're not even delivering water where it's needed. But also, water at the surface will help you create a rhizosphere. It's got bugs, worms, beneficial fungi, all that. But that needs mulching. So mulch is most critical. Mulch is the best thing you can do. The single best thing. Forget about what you can buy at Bunnings. The best thing you can do for your garden is to mulch it. So organic mulch. So that's just lawn clippings, or not too many lawn clippings all at once, but mixed particle mulches with arborist mulch is the best because it's often got this and that in it. It tips out the back of the truck. It's a good mixed particle size, mixed species. Once that starts breaking down, you create what's called a rhizosphere or organic layer, and that's when you really are doing what Mother Nature does, and you'll grow a much better tree or a much better garden as well. Same with veggie gardens. So drippers are fine because it lives at the surface, but once in a while, a good old soaking in a nice big earthen bowl, and that gravitational water coming through, flushing out gases, sucking gases behind it, and then wetting up the mulch layer, and you've just got a whole ecosystem under your mulch. That's what it needs. So yeah, it depends where you are and what soil it is and what tree it is and how old the tree is. We tend to water trees for a nominal period of 3 years. Like it takes about 3 years to establish a tree. So when we plant street trees like that, we have a 3-year regime. You can generally walk away at year 3, and occasionally on a really hot summer, you might revisit your favourite ones and give them a little sip, but that's it. Yeah. But when you're in your backyard, if you've got a favourite tree, you want to keep watering it, by all means, keep watering it. Nikki.
Hi. For suburban backyards,
Yep.
where do I start in looking at selections? I've had to have 2 trees removed. One because the council knocked on the door one day and said it was affecting, so I think it was a septic waste.
Yep.
I had to get it removed by a deadline, otherwise I was up for fees and damage control. And then I also had to have another tree removed because it was affecting a neighbour's front veranda. So when I now go and look at trees, and there's lots of different information to what you read on the card, to what you read online, I just don't know where to start or where to go.
Yeah. Ring up Joanna Wells, she'll help you. She's sitting up the back there. Or ring me up, one of the two. They do, but it's not really science. It's not really... and they have the wood industry has quite a stringent law about where you can plant and where you can't plant. And if everyone obeyed that, there wouldn't be any street trees. It's impossible. And now you've been a victim of circumstance, so you might have a drainage easement on your house. Is that where you had to remove a tree over a sewer or something like that, or is there why did the council make you remove a tree on your front lawn? But you had to remove a tree was on your front lawn, and whose septic you're affecting? Oh, okay. So you made a decision to remove the tree because of that. The council did. Are you on a swim system or what sort of a system are you? Right. The council does that. All right. Okay, that's unfortunate. Depending on what sort of septic or sewage system, but look, what happens is the trees will not affect any plumbing if the plumbing's not leaking. So if there's plumbing's leaking, the trees will get into it. So questions about what tree I can plant and what, because of pipes. It's not about the tree, it's about the pipes. So if the pipes aren't leaking, you're good to go. You can plant whatever you like. Well, you wouldn't go plant a massive fig tree, or because a bigger tree requires a bigger root system. Generally speaking, most tree species across the world have a similar root plate system. They're just the same root plate system. Some species will have more, you hear all these sort of hearsay about what's going to be more aggressive or not. Sure, like a willow or a fig, possibly more aggressive, meaning it will have a bigger system and will exploit areas of dampness better than or more virulently than other species do. But generally, roots are the same. It goes by the size of the organism. So the size of the organism, the size of the tree, will be proportionally to what it needs under the ground, like roughly. So you've got a big river red gum, you can be sure as heck it's going to have roots three houses away. It's going to be under the old road because it was there before the road was built. So it's going to have a massive system of roots everywhere. But something that you just plant on the verge for fancy, it starts with no roots and it'll just exploit wherever it can go. So it's more of a function of root ingress and roots. It's more of a function of the environment rather than the species. Okay, wrap your head around that. So a root will go wherever it can because it can. Leaky pipes are a great one. Leaky septic systems are a great one to get into. Sometimes people are happy just to clear their pipes once a year. They just get a plumber and go, zip, there you go. It's cheaper than removing a tree. And just by the way, once you remove the tree, guess what? You've still got leaky plumbing. Lawn roots can then come and block it up. The shrub over the driveway will block up a leaky pipe, but you've spent $3,000 on removing an awesome tree. You got to sort of be careful what people are directing you or telling you. Just hold fire until you get all the facts first, and try and retain your canopy. Try and retain your big tree, and that's People don't like. Some people don't like big trees and they're just worried about it. They cut them down. That's life. But as you can see in one of those photos we had, you can actually have trees and all your infrastructure as well. And you might have to put up with a bit of a crack now and then or a lifted paver, but that's all fixable. And particularly pipes. Pipes are a very fixable thing, surface pipes. So septic tanks are a bit more expensive, but if you sealed your septic tank, nothing can get into it. Yeah. So, anything else? Any more questions? What's your favourite tree? Where do I shop for trees? I go to Bunnings if I shop at Bunnings because they give you a receipt and it's called the Perfect Plant Promise. Doesn't matter what you buy from there. You got 12 months to take it back, even if you kill it. Just thought I'd put that out there for you. So, but when you really want to get serious about buying a cool tree, you might have to go to a real good tree farm somewhere in the Adelaide Hills or one of the other nurseries around the place. But if you are going to buy a really cool tree, make sure the roots are right. But if you do buy one from Bunnings, you get it home and you take it apart and you go, oh, hang on, and then it dies, you just take it back. You know. But you could do your test when you get home and you think if you get home and it looks like that, you go, hang on, the Perfect Plant Promise. It's not perfect. Go swap it, get a credit. But that's what all nurseries should do anyway, and they often do. If you take it back and go, look at this. What I want to do, I want you to challenge you. Go on, if you got a tree at home that's not growing very well, walk up to it. Or walk up to this tree that you think is not growing very well, and give it a wobble. And if it wobbles, it's got a root problem. And if you can see, it might have been there for 5 years or 10 years, and if you can do that to it, if the ground around it's firm and it sort of does feel firm, it's probably okay. But if you can see a bit of a rock, and it's easy to rock it around, it probably looks like that, and you'll dig it up. If you get sick of it and you dig it up, you'll probably find that. If a tree is successfully established, you can get like that. Oh, there's a mouse in there. I'll get rid of that later. There you go. There's all sorts of biodiversity. Happening there. If you give it a rock and it's solid it's probably established. It's probably all right. There you go. Mysis. Got a terrorist mouse. We call that. That's a great test. Just go and shake a tree, and if it's moving too much, if you can see the ground moving and it's wobbly, it's probably like that. But if you can't move, if you can wobble the trunk, but you can't wobble the ground, it's probably okay. Just gives you an idea if it's been rooted in or not. Sorry about the mouse.
That's all right. I've got another question, Chris. With the new planning design code, there's this new opportunity to have a tree with the subdivisions that are happening. What are your thoughts around create, like having space on residential land, whether it's, you know, maybe a 90% site coverage or something like that, and you've got a little bit of spot for a tree to put in there. Is there a particular type of tree or something that people should be thinking about in how they might be perhaps planning that development? And some of those things around the load-bearing, I can't remember what the terminology was that you used, but
all that.
Is it about how the house is built or what
if
tree
someone
you
was
choose?
really keen, if someone was really keen about it, you could, if you wanted to put a medium-sized tree or a large tree in a small allotment, you could rip in a tree trench, a non-load-bearing tree trench. Very cheap, very easy. You're creating space for roots in a doesn't complement natural processes, but it does provide volume for roots. So you can get size and have your roots because you've just made them go down and fill that whole trench up, rather than they want to go like that, but you're forcing them down like that. All that load-bearing stuff, it's sort of more for public precincts. It's not realistic, I don't think, for mums and dads and new home buyers. When it comes to the code, I think we sort of failed a bit, or the government sort of failed a bit to provide a mandatory need to plant some sort of tree or have some sort of green space on your tiny urban allotment. That's a shame. But then that should then spill out to, well, it does in a sense. We have to have a lot of street trees, so it's one per allotment. But still, the streets are too narrow. It's still going to cause conflicts. We're not going to have. It's not the perfect world. It's it's not dystopia, but it's not utopia. It's sort of we're still finding our feet. And you people have got older blocks. Kath's got a really nice old block. She's got trees. So the bigger the block, the more chance you got of having a nice garden. But if you've got who's got a small block? Someone had a unit. Who's got a unit? Yes. Well, trees in massive pots or massive containers, you still can grow some nice, and have a nice amenity and that sort of mental relief still. Not as much transevap cooling and that sort of thing, but you can have some green life around. I've got some trees in pots. I don't mind that. I've got trees everywhere. So wherever, and sometimes you can't plant a tree, so you can put one in a pot there though, can't you? So at least do that. Garden your verges. Get out there. Just plant trees on your verges. Talk to the council first. And don't do anything silly. Don't do anything I wouldn't do. Wherever you can put a tree, we should be putting a tree. And that's for us as councils. We should be putting trees where we can put trees, wherever we can. And anyhow we can do that, all those methods. We should not be leaving too many vacant spaces. And now's the time to do it because, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago, for obvious reasons. But there is a lot of small tree species though. If you've got a small allotment and you don't want to go to great lengths like that, and you don't want to put a tree trench in, and your neighbours aren't gonna like the big spotted gum over the fence. There's a lot of nice small tree species you can put in, mostly deciduous, but even some small evergreens. There's nice natives that you can put in. Like lemon myrtle's a great one. I could go for hours. There's backhouses, citrudora. There's Buckingham here. There's blueberry ash. It's a nice little evergreen native. So there's lots of little ones you can put in that, it's stuff you can use and cook. And if you've got a nice little metro pad and you're into chefing, there's lots of little evergreen trees you can use to cook with, and it's all cool. Yeah.
I've got a question here from online. What causes suckering from tree roots? How can it be avoided? And are there trees that are more susceptible to suckering?
Yes, indeed. Good question. Thank you from Zoomland. It's species related. So there is trees that will sucker. So it's certain species that do that from their root plate. So if you nick a root, it will send up an above ground shoot. So things like some species of Australian casuarina do that. Elms do that. You know that. You've seen creek lines full of elm thickets. That's generally off a parent tree. Just all these little suckers coming off a parent tree. So a sucker is a shoot coming off a root, essentially. So that happens in some deciduous species and some evergreen species. Some Australian species do it, like your casuarina. Yeah, but it's not a big problem. Just go snip it off. If you like the parent tree, just snip it off. Don't poison them. Don't glyphosate your suckers because you make the parent tree sick. All right, yeah.
All right. Well, thanks, Chris. We'll wrap it up there. Thank you, everyone, for your questions, and a big thank you to Chris for sharing your immense knowledge and passion on trees.
That's a pleasure. Thank you very much.